Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that builds cars. And so really where our time and attention is right now is it developing that. And I fully expect over the next 5 to 10 years that things that required software developers in the past will no longer require that. Everyday people can get the same sorts of jobs done. And they would say, okay, AI is going to figure out the basic tasks first, and they're going to move into more intermediate stuff. And then someday long in the future, it's going to do all the creative design kind of work. And it's like totally flipped, right? All the creative design work is what's being solved before the rudimentary task. The most important thing, and this is the most important lesson I've ever learned in business.
Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back everybody to another great episode on Learn or Be Learned. Today's guest is Mike Kauding. He's in the real estate business and he's done a lot of things to, innovate and change up the industry. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Mike. Mike, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This should be a lot of fun.
For sure. Do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself for the audience?
Yeah, at a high level, we design, build, and rent apartments, but we're really about solving housing affordability. Right now, we're already building at about 20 to 30% less than other developers, and we believe we can achieve a 50% reduction in costs. But imagine what that means.
Right.
It means someday your rent could be half, or your mortgage payment could be half. And that's the kind of impact that we're fighting to try to make in this nation.
Right. Was that always the vision or has that developed over time?
It has developed a little bit over time. When I grew up, so this was originally a family business and my parents originally started it. And I can remember family outings where we would drive a half an hour to the local hardware store. And each one of us kids would fill up 2 full cartloads of materials and stuff.
Right.
And then we put it in the back of my dad's trailer, which this was kind of a rinky-dink operation. When we'd be driving on the highway, the thing was packed to the brim, and I don't know if it was entirely legal. And when so growing up, we'd be building these small little buildings. 8, 10 units at a time. That was a lot of my summers. And then I went off to college, and I didn't want anything to do with the family business.
All right.
And the reason I didn't want that is I didn't want people to think it was given to me. So I really wrestled with my own ego during that time, trying to find my own way. But what I learned about myself is that I knew I wanted to make some kind of meaningful, positive impact on the world. And I realized I could take this small family business and grow it into that. And so I got past my own ego on that regard. And my dad and I worked together for the first couple of years. And then one day he just passed away, totally unexpected. And we lost him. And here I am now at the helm of this company. And if I'm honest, looking back, I really didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
But I think that was sort of the magic. Because we could start questioning everything. Like, why are we doing it this certain way? We didn't know the way things were supposed to be done. And so, and there was nobody to tell me no. And we just started incrementally changing what we were doing and improving and getting better. And it wasn't always easy. I've got some stories of some real hard knocks, but it was through that process we started to see the kind of impact we could have and realizing that that impact could be solving housing affordability.
Right. So, I want to take a step back for a second and unpack what you had mentioned earlier about battling your own ego, right?
Mm.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, parents having an expectation and you wanting to do something else, or, something of your own nature, or perhaps you don't, they have, the person listening has a family business and they don't want to get involved yet. I think I hear that very often, even from other guests in the past. They've said the same thing, like, I want to do my own path. My parents wanted me to do this. What was your thought process like when kind of getting over that?
It was a struggle. In college, I was very much about virtual reality and special effects. I had a degree in computer science, mathematics, and management. I was doing a bunch of small businesses, working with them, just trying to find my way. I think probably the most important thing is just for yourself is to figure out what you honestly want.
Hmm.
Because if you don't line yourself up with your passion in life, you're going to really struggle because you're going to hate every day of work and what you're
Right.
doing. But if you line yourself up well, coming to work is a joy. And so, what I think was really important for me is to figure out what my own way was. And once I started to see how my own way could line up in line actually well with what my dad and my parents wanted, it actually worked for me. But if that doesn't happen, then you got to take the harder route and say, no, this isn't for me, because you're just going to be happier in life if you do that.
Right. So I'm guessing there was a lot of self-reflection, thinking, writing, or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a whole year. I remember the first, it took a year process for me. And that first year, I did half commit to working with my dad. And
Right.
I think if my dad was really honest, he'd be like, that kid was no good. And the
Right.
reason that is because my heart wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was doing a number of other things with other businesses. There was a fruit company that was delivering organic fruit to your home. There was a toy company I was working with that was like this marble maze toy that was really neat. And I don't know. I think I just had to spend a year a little bit in the wilderness and kind of bashing my head against walls and getting
Right.
some scars and seeing what the world was really like for me to kind of grow up and realize like the opportunity I had in front of me.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. And it almost sounds like once your vision narrowed on a particular business, you were able to grow it to what it is now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, having that focus is important because one of the things we talk about within our company is we want to be best in the world at what we do.
Hmm.
Now, do you think you have any shot at being best in the world if you're not focused on just
Right.
one thing? There's no
Right.
way, right? And
Yeah.
if you can't be at that kind of level, like I don't know. For me, at least, I don't want to do something that I'm not at least attempting to be at a world class level.
Hmm. And at what point does somebody then take on extra different projects or maybe a completely different business, in your opinion?
I know people do, and I'm no fault to them, especially if they've got a current job and they want to move into a different industry and they do some work on the side building that up. I think that makes sense. Um, I just don't think either are going to be phenomenal. So you eventually got to figure out what you're going to do. So for me, I try to stay laser focused on one thing. And for us, that's building and managing awesome apartments. But I'm willing to go as deep as it requires to be phenomenal in that space. So we don't go wide, right? We're not in like retail. We're not in hotels, which might be kind of even similar. We're not in other kinds of real estate, but we are incredibly deep in our particular niche and going deep. So we have plumbers, electricians, we have manufacturing, we have supply chain, we have engineers and architects. We've got PR, we've got international team. We go incredibly deep because that helps us become incredibly great in that one area. So we go not wide, but deep.
I relate to your story a little bit. I think about maybe when I was 8, 10, my parents had switched to construction. So,
Mm,
yeah, so I have a little bit of similar background of knowing what
yeah.
it's like to go on weekends to the, hardware shop or whatever, and you get all the extra little supplies in your garage, and there's just all concrete, wood, everything, right? Just everywhere. And, I want to ask now because having that similar understanding a little bit, I've heard my parents say in the past that it's common for oftentimes for the predecessor to join the business in construction, real estate, things like that.
Mhm.
And my parents said they've seen this before where a child or someone you knew joins the company and they have all these great ideas and energy, and all the older people or people that are more experienced or been in the field for a while are not too keen about quick change and quick changes and adaptations like that. So have you experienced anything like that when you started?
I have certainly seen it in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
This industry, humans, we are comfortable with what we know, right? We're not excited to change a bunch of stuff. It worked yesterday. I'm good again for tomorrow. And especially in the world of construction, it tends to be that. Like my
Mm,
grandpa did it this way, my dad did it this way, I'm
right.
doing this way, and by golly, you got to do it the same way, right?
Right.
And it stops innovation. Um, I was a little bit fortunate in that my dad wasn't that hard nosed. And so he did give me some freedom while he was here. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there were certain bounds and there were probably appropriate bounds. But certainly when he was gone, there was nobody to place bounds on what we did. And that was good as far as innovation is concerned. Um, but we were incredibly naive. So we would
Mm-hmm.
take on things that were like, oh, that we'll figure it out. We'll be fine. And like, I've got the battle scars to know why so many people
Right.
say don't go down that route. But I'm glad we did. We're in a better place today. And in fact, not knowing how difficult it was probably was an asset for us.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it's oftentimes if you see how big the mountain is, you don't want to take that first step, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can look back at the top now being like, okay, we really didn't know much, but the other way around can be very daunting.
Hmm. Exactly.
Right. So, that leads me to ask you now, you've joined this industry and I've checked out your website. I love it. I love the aesthetic of
Yeah.
it and I love the vision and the mission. How do you incorporate innovations and adapting in this industry?
Mm. So,
Or I guess another way to ask is
yeah.
what are you doing differently?
Okay. Yeah. So at a high level, it's really quite simple. We're taking the innovations from other industries and applying it to construction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at manufacturing over the past 60 years, they've improved labor productivity by 760%. Agriculture has improved by 1,500%. Construction during that time period has done virtually nothing, just 10%.
Right.
And so we have, for example, a partnership with Toyota. One of the first things that we changed, if you look at this industry, it's very segmented. Typically, not always, but typically, the owner is a different company than the general contractor coordinating construction, who's different than all your subs, your plumbers, your electricians, your HVAC, who's different yet again from supply chain and manufacturing. If construction were to produce a car, you'd have a different person installing the windshield, a different person installing the door, and a different company entirely installing the wheel. And of course, what would happen is the wheel company would get delayed on another project and they couldn't come out there for a couple of weeks. You'd be shut down. And then when the wheel company did come out, they would be irate because they could only work on one car at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Manufacturing looks at what we do and they think we're crazy, but this is normal in our industry. So bringing everything under one roof improves efficiencies right there, but then you can apply techniques like the assembly line. Now you think, dude, I know assembly lines have done great work in manufacturing. How in the world do you take a huge building and put it on a line and slide it down a line? Well, you don't. Instead of moving the building down the line, you move the person through the building. So right now, every 5 hours, all of our teams shift through the building, batch by batch. And so if you look at the end of our building, every 5 hours, another fully completed apartment unit is done. And
Wow.
so that's some of the flavor of the things we're doing differently to drive down costs.
Right. Story reminds me of McDonald's and how they innovated
Yeah.
the way they looked at business, right? And I remember hearing this one story about a manager looking at how can we make this more efficient, the line of people moving to make food. And instead of, oftentimes managers, they'll jump in to help. But these managers, they took a step back, they watched the assembly, and they said, okay, these people keep running to this soda machine. Why are they not going to the other one? And then they realize, oh, that one's out of ice. So they're like, okay, get some ice over there. And then the lines, got easier on them because not everybody was rushing to one machine. So it was like they kept looking for weak points and then, fixed that and made the assembly line a lot easier.
Exactly right. We call that bottleneck analysis in our world. But yeah, you chase the bottleneck trying to improve the overall system.
So how did you get that idea?
Well, the original ideas of like bringing all the work in house, that kind of hit me in the face. We were building a building, and I remember the plumber coming to us and saying, Mike, I know we've been doing the same building the last few years, but this year we're going to have to triple the bid for plumbing. It's
Oh.
like, dude, I mean, this was around the time my dad died. And I'm like, dude, I just don't have the money. Like, I don't have it, right? How am I going to solve this problem? So we went and looked at other plumbers and we found everyone was charging this price. They were being fair, but again, I didn't have the money. And so I went and started buying a bunch of plumbing books and doing some of our own research. And then we found a guy who's willing to come help out like part-time with some of the plumbing stuff to help teach us, who is licensed. And we hired a few people that could be learning from these plumbers. And we went out there and we did our own plumbing. And it was terrible, right? This is that like horrible
Right.
cliff. But we got through it. And getting through it meant we started to learn it. And we've applied now other techniques, but now we've gotten to the point where our plumbing teams are probably among the best in the entire state at what they do,
Wow.
right? But that one issue we wouldn't have done unless it hadn't hit me in the face. So sometimes necessity is the mother of innovation.
That's true. That is true. That's awesome because basically you've taken the industry's idea and tried to make everything in-house almost.
Yeah.
So where do you see, because you were talking about housing affordability and things like that, where do you see the innovation taking place in this industry in the next decade or two? Are 3D printed homes going to be a thing, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah. The innovation won't come from where you expect. The things that make the news are the flashy, crazy new stuff. They're great. They are a part of the solution. They are not the solution. And the reality is to solve the problem, you have to solve 10,000 little, boring, non-newsworthy problems, right? And it's those 10,000 little things that you fixed that make the greatest impact. Elon Musk talks about how it's hard to produce a car, but it is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder to produce the system that builds cars. And so really where our time and attention is right now is at developing that system. So for us, we're starting to move more and more work off-site. So we have a couple of manufacturing facilities now. One is doing completed exterior wall panels. Another one is doing precast concrete. Hoping to expand beyond that. Eventually we hope to get to the point where we've got sort of the gigafactory, but for apartments, right?
Right.
At that kind of scale, doing that kind of work. It's not all going to be offsite. There's kind of an interesting hybrid that has to take place. There's work we're doing with engineers right now, which was really cool. So typically engineers and architects, they design your building. That's good. There's a lot of pain points there, but that's good. But that's not where engineers and architects should be spending their time. They should be working on the system that designs buildings. And so our team right now is working we have software developers in-house too, but they're working on the programs. The dream is so that you pass a site plan, a layout of the overall lot, and then the computer takes that, takes all of our lessons and learnings and systems and designs out an entire building with a click of a button. And then based upon that, it can produce all the different components needed to build that building. It can schedule everything out and when things need to be delivered. And so that's a dream state. That's not today, but they're working on elements of that overarching process. And then the engineers not are only working on engineering their design workflow, but they're starting to think about how do we design the factories that build these buildings. And so that's just a world that construction is not in, but that's where we're spending our time to move the industry forward.
hmm Is that using machine learning and AI type software or?
It will be involved for sure. One of the
Right.
team members right now, it's crazy. ChatGPT is amazing. And I use it actually almost every day in my workflow now.
Yeah.
But they're taking ChatGPT, using natural language and telling it what they want. It's then generating the code that they use. So the 3D modeling
Right.
system we use is called Revit, but it's generating the scripts and the code that they're then using, and they're tweaking a little bit and plugging it into the overall system. So the
Right.
AI right now is helping build it, but I imagine someday we'll use AI to communicate in natural language and say, okay, that building looks nice, but I want it to be another floor. I want to remove this section, tweak
Right.
that, change that color. And we'll have a conversation with the computer as it's helping us design our buildings.
I think right now it's very exciting times for
Oh,
visionaries,
yeah.
especially because, I don't know too much about code. I know a little bit of code. I don't know any HTML or CSS, right? So I don't know that stuff, but I know what I'm looking for and what I would want in a website or something, right? Go to ChatGPT, ask, okay, I want, what is the CSS code for making this square block a little bit more round and orange? And it'll, type that out for me without me having to learn CSS from a book or, a YouTube video and try to master it and then apply it, right? So it's almost like a dream come true in a way, a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. My degree is in computer science and I love that industry. And it's been so interesting. If you look at the past 30 years, the progression of computer science has been to make the programming easier and easier and easier. You can do more with less effort. I mean, originally it was literally all in ones and zeros. And then the
Yeah,
slight step up from that is like is assembly, where you have a code, a three-letter code that just represents eight ones and zeros. And so it's
right,
just gotten better and better and better. And so even the last 10 years has been a radical improvement. But the rate of change right now in AI is insane. And I fully expect over the next 5 to 10 years that things that required software developers in the past will no longer require that. Everyday people can get the same sorts of jobs done, which will be incredible.
right, right. A lot of people talk about this topic and it's almost makes you wonder what jobs really are available because if you need a real estate contract, ChatGPT can write it up for you. If you need a marketing ad campaign script, you can ask it to do that too, right? Especially the smarter it gets, or I guess I should say the more knowledge it acquires, it'll have, what is Norhart and it'll know more and more about the company and it can tailor it and give you specific ad campaigns and whatever you need. So it's like we said, for visionaries, I think it's just incredibly exciting, but it's still so early to tell where it's headed in what
Yeah.
direction.
You know
Yeah.
what blows my mind is that even a couple of years ago, people were talking about AI as this distant off thing. And they would say, okay, AI is going to figure out the basic tasks first, and they're going to move into more intermediate stuff. And then someday, long in the future, it's going to do all the creative design and kind of work. And it's like totally flipped, right?
Right.
All the creative design work is what's being solved before the rudimentary tasks. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, right. It's I don't think people expected it to go backwards like that. It's almost
Yeah.
like the pyramid got flipped and it's going after design and scripting and writing first and then, eventually it'll make its way down to code and then it'll make its way down to, manual labor jobs as you
Yeah.
apply it to robots and things like that, right? So it's very crazy to think about where it's headed, but this is an absolutely great time to take advantage of that technology, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I guess on the topic of that, actually, I wanted to mention before that you had said your idea about systems, and
Mm.
that was a really strong insight because I love this quote by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. He says, "You don't rise to the level of your habits, you fall to the level of your systems." And I don't think
Mm,
people realize so oftentimes how important the system is because I think I think when somebody buys a company off of somebody, they're really just buying your system and maybe your
yeah.
branding, but your system is so important because, there's so many companies out there, but it's the ones that really made it have such a strong system in place.
That's true. Yeah, getting that infrastructure in place is it's so challenging, but once you do, it's
Yeah.
so freeing because it gets
Right.
you to stop thinking about the mundane, how this moves there, what this, all these different things, and gets us to your best brain power is not solving the everyday problems, but it's how to evolve the system to the next level, right?
Right. Right. I mean, I think a perfect example is my calendar links for these episodes. I used to have Calendly, just a free account, and sometimes we'd have miscommunication with guests or recording times,
Mm,
and there was no confirmation email and all sorts of things. So then I spent the upfront time of like 6 hours or whatever, and just learned everything about Calendly, how to make it automated, how to integrate everything, make it more detailed, make sure it's easy for the guests to find the links and everything. So once I did that, now I get text confirmations, they get email confirmations, things like that, and it made my life so much easier because I'll be grocery shopping and I'll get a text that says, okay, this person just booked a recording. But before, I wouldn't know unless I checked my email or calendar or whatever, right? So it was the systems are so important. I just can't stress
I
that
love
enough.
that. One of the things we talk about within our team is that we want to challenge people every day to just make a 5-second improvement to what you do, right? And
Mm.
in your case, it's more than 5 seconds. But if you spend a few hours improving some kind of system or something that you have to deal with every day, that really compounds with time, right?
Yeah.
Another way we like to put it is just fix what bugs you. I'm shocked
Right.
at how many people are just okay living life with these things that are kind of wasting their time throughout life. They just kind of put up with what bugs them. But if you spend a little bit of time to change it, and you spend that time every day, it's like interest. It compounds in a super powerful way for you in your life.
Right. So what are some examples of the 5 second ways people are improving themselves in the company?
Yeah. So really simple example is so all the different teams on site have these pods. They're basically shipping containers where they can store their supply, not their supplies. They're like equipment and tools and stuff like that. And so one of the teams had a pod that was just a mess.
Hmm.
Uh, and it would take them a few minutes every day to like sort through it and find their stuff. So one day they said, "This is enough. Like we're changing this." They went and cleaned out their pod, right? Super simple, but saved them time that adds up over time. We have another example I can think of is the HVAC team. They had to climb a ladder, attach a bolt to the ceiling to put their pipe through attach the pipe to the ceiling. And up a ladder, attach, down a ladder, up a ladder, attach, down a ladder. And then they realized, well, we can just get an extension on a drill so that we can attach it from below and you don't need a ladder anymore. It just works. And so they saved themselves a few seconds through each one of those processes. The more advanced I've seen is teams that actually get into patented designs. And so one of the patented things, actually, like pretty brand new employee came up with a way to turn our coils of steel, these giant like round steel things that we have to provide to our supplies, and they have to tilt them, but they're like 5,000 pounds. And they came up with this like very simple contraption that helps them tilt them in a way that is radically faster. And because
Right.
it's an actual device, we were able to patent it. And he's a licensed, a full patented inventor now.
You said that was a new employee?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We
Wow.
we really fight to find the very best. And then when you have people like that, even if they're brand new, they come up with that kind of innovation.
Right. That that gets my mind thinking of two questions, right? One is you must have a good company culture if somebody new is
Mm.
able to incorporate something, innovate something, and even have the space to think about how to make those changes. And then two is, you said you're always searching for great talent. So I would want to ask, what is that process like? But, let's go back to the first question, right? Company culture, and I've seen it on your website. It's a huge portion of Norhard and what your mission is. So how did you, what techniques or strategies did you put in place to ensure a quality and genuine culture to be formed?
There's a lot that goes into that, but
Yeah.
the most important thing, and this is the most important lesson I've ever learned in business, is hire the very best people. If you do that, it will change your world and change your business, because the best people unlock doors and achieve results that you never imagined were even possible. Oftentimes the pushback I get at this stage is like, Mike, it's great, but I'm not Google. Like, I'm not you. I can't afford to hire the very
Right.
best. And what goes in that thinking is that, man, the person is expensive, and they're expensive on a cost per person basis. And that's true. But the thing that they miss is that the best people outperform the average by 2 to 5 to 10 times as much. And I've seen it over and over again. And so when you look at the cost of that person divided by what they're actually producing, they're actually the least expensive people you can hire. So when people say I can't afford not to, or I can't afford to hire somebody at that level, I tell them they can't afford not to. And we didn't always understand that. And that again hit me in the face. But once we made that change, it changed the game for us. And so when building out the right culture, finding the right people is foundationally the most important thing. Um, Great people can solve a lot of problems and make things a lot better for people. Another key part of culture is just defining what it is. Like knowing what your purpose is or why you exist. What's your mission? What are you trying to do? What are your values? Who are you is really the question with that. And then you want to communicate them. So, for example, I do every single orientation every single week as we hire new people each week. I do follow-up orientation with people. I walk the sites, I interact. We do a number of meetings and engagements like that. Uh, so there's a whole world we can get into. But one other point I'll mention though is with hiring the best people, we've learned to be extraordinarily robust with that. And so in our industry in construction, it's been hard to find great people.
Mm-hmm.
What we ended up doing was we hired on 14 recruiters. And we're about 250 people today. So 14 recruiters is a ton of recruiters for our size company. But we don't just look for people who apply online. Instead, we go out and we look at all of our competitors. We identify all the people that work in the competitor companies. We start to build relationships with those people over time so that when we have a position that opens up, we know who the best people are so we can pluck them off and have them come work for us.
Right. I love that, right? It reminds me, it's almost counterintuitive. It's to the human mind, right? You think, okay, well, I don't have a ton of money to spend on, the best, but the ROI of doing that is actually you're wasting more money not doing it. And it's so counterintuitive for us to conceptualize, but it reminds me of this interview I watched yesterday with Alex Hermosi. He's a huge business guy, and he was talking about he didn't understand Facebook ads, and he knew somebody that did, but he comes to this guy and he says, can you teach me? And the guy goes, no, I don't sell my time. And he said, well, it's America. Everybody sells their time. Name a price. And the guy goes, he does some math. He goes, okay, $7.50 an hour. And, to, a person that you might go, wow, $750 an hour. Like, it's not going to take you 1 hour to learn Facebook ads. It'll be at least a few, right? He said it took him 8 hours. So it took him $6,000 to learn Facebook ads, but that ROI brought him hundreds of thousands of dollars because he mastered Facebook ads by somebody that really knew what they were doing in that field, right? That's that little
And
specialized knowledge.
that what you just
Go ahead.
said there at the end is the key. I
Mm-hmm.
think there are a lot of teachers and things in different industries. There is a huge difference between the very best in that industry versus the others in that industry. We do the same thing. We will fly people in from other states and stuff, plead with them, come work with us just for a couple of days so we can
Right.
learn what you know. And
Mm-hmm.
it is incredible. We had a guy recently who is a savant at concrete. He can make
Mm-hmm.
concrete clean itself, right?
Wow.
And the knowledge and expertise he had in that, he was like this master chemist of concrete. And we could do
Right.
crazy things with it that helps drastically improve the work that we're doing. But yeah, I'm part of a lot of master classes. We find world experts. Like, honestly, I love it. And that is where
Mm-hmm.
you learn some of the best of the best knowledge.
Right. It almost sounds like you've incorporated this idea of, in a way, of not being the smartest in the room, right? You want to find
Exactly.
people best in very different things and then kind of bring the system together. And I think that's the essence of being a CEO or a businessman, right? Is
Mm,
how well can you bring a team and people of like-minded interests together?
it's exactly right. I've heard it said that, especially in the software world, that each person you hire should be able to bring in $1 million of income in the software world. They may cost a couple 100,000. And if that's true, your problem isn't finances. Your problem is finding and attracting those people to come work with you. Because once they do that, they're basically giving you $700,000 or $800,000 a year to work with them. So
Right.
that is the name of the game, is bringing the best people together.
Right. And I'm assuming, as you're growing, you have to get better at letting go and delegating. And I know
Mm,
that can be a hard quality to develop for certain people, of letting go, right? Especially if the vision is yours and you want to make sure it's done right. But like you said, what helps you kind of let go and delegate easier?
yeah, I work with a lot of our managers within our company, and I see this over and over again. I think the one interesting insight that I think a lot of people miss on this topic is, yes, we need to delegate, but if you have someone working for you that is as good or better than you, delegation is easy. Even for the managers that want to keep it to them, they start realizing, like, oh my gosh, that design is better than I can come up with. Like, just go for it. Where I think a lot of people struggle is they don't have the right team. And so they struggle with delegating because they're reasonably uncomfortable that that person will be able to do it as well and at a high enough quality. And so I think that's where a lot of the struggle is. So we spend more time on just getting the right people, and delegation just happens.
That makes a lot of sense. The ability and comfortability to delegate comes from, if you can believe that that person can do equal or better job than you, then it's easy to let
Exactly.
it go. Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. So I guess this comes back to full circle with, what you're doing here, right? So you've focused a lot on people, a lot on culture and creating a community towards a vision. Where is Norhart headed towards that goal of making housing affordable?
Great question. One thing people often ask us is, are your rents cheap today? And the answer to that is no. We charge market rate rents. Like, but you're trying to solve housing affordability. Like, what's going on there? And the answer is quite simple. If we were to lower rents today, that would solve housing affordability for a few thousand people. That's great, but it's not the nation. How do
Hmm.
we solve it for the nation? Instead, we're taking those profits to build the system that builds housing, right? And our dream is to scale up to a point in the next 10 years to be producing about 60,000 apartment units per year. and reaching about 192,000 units under management. At that point, we're starting to meaningfully impact the supply of housing. So with enough supply, that means prices come down. But here's the magic. It's not just for our own residents. It's for everyone nationwide, right? Because it's an open market.
Right.
And that's how you solve housing affordability. And that's our long-term dream.
Right. So this sounds a lot like the idea of thinking in a longer time horizon, right? To make goals in 10, 20, 30 years span. What techniques do you use to get better at developing a longer time horizon goals, right? I'd say, especially younger people, I think, have a difficult time of understanding the time horizon of goals, especially because life can be unpredictable and you're still trying to figure things out. And, at what point do you get better at creating long time horizon goals? Is it a practice? Do you keep just trying new things? How does that work?
I think once you get out to decades, it becomes a little bit of a guessing game, honestly, because you don't know. You don't know all that you know. And a decade is a long time. You can look at a little bit of your recent history to help guide you, and that's helped guide some of our goal setting. But the most common problem I see is people are afraid to dream. I mean, maybe they'll dream internally, but to get to a point of being willing to say the kind of goals that we say, like there's a fear in that because who am I to be able to achieve that kind of goal? And when I talk to people that have had success in their life, one of the most common things that I hear is, I wish I had dreamed bigger. So my big challenge is to dream big and then help that guide you on, okay, what does 10 years look like? Then if I want to get there in 10 years, what does 5 years look like? What does 3 years look like? What does 1 year look like? What does 3 months and what does tomorrow look like? And that helps just set you on the right path. And one of my favorite quotes, just to remind yourself, is that you should shoot for the moon because even if you miss it, you'll be among the stars. So dare to dream big enough is my big challenge.
Right. So let's say, at what point does it become almost a sense
Ludicrous?
of delusion, right? Like for example, someone saying, I want to do this massive thing in 5 years, and somebody more experienced will say, well, it takes more than 5 years. But then again, some people can do it. It's really the way of thinking, right? So when is it delusion and when is it thinking big?
um, well, first off, you should listen to the feedback you receive from others, but be careful. There's been so many times in what we've done that people have said, Mike, you're an idiot. Stop doing that, right? And if I had listened to them, we wouldn't be talking here today.
Right.
One little example of that is we built out an internet service provider as part of our offering to our residents because we want to improve that experience. They didn't have to log into internet, anything like that. Everyone, oh my gosh, everyone was against me on this point, even people in our own company. And
Right.
it was a drag. It was really an awful 9 months to build out that infrastructure. But now that we have it, people are like, dude, this is awesome. Like we should have done this years ago.
Right.
Come on. Right. And so there's a little
Right,
bit of
right.
like, you just have to have some belief in yourself, but you have to be careful. I think you need to be realistic about your strengths and your weaknesses. Don't be negative about those weaknesses. Realize that you need great people around you. So you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, and that helps you be more equipped. Ask a lot of questions, find a mentor, find people who have done that journey before you, learn from them, get sort of a baseline from that. My original big, hairy, audacious goals weren't as big as they are today. That was some of the insight I received from others that got me kind of on the right foot. But once I got into it, I realized, no, I should be dreaming even bigger. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's any like magic formula to solve that for people, but yeah, I guess here's one thing. If you set a big long-term 10-year goal, break it down into smaller goals. right? Understand 5 and understand 3 years, understand 1 year, understand months. And if you're measuring yourself over the course of months on how you're achieving the short-term goals, if you're on track with that, you know your long-term goal is probably pretty good. If you're
Right.
not, then maybe you need to reevaluate where you're at or what you're doing.
Right. Something in the system needs to change.
Yeah.
So that brings me to ask, right? So you have big goals that you're going after.
Mm.
What steps do you take? Because you had mentioned before, right? For many people, it's the fear of thinking big in itself paralyzes you from taking the first step. So what have you noticed in your line of work, or going through what you've been through? What is the differentiator between people that take that first step for that big dream versus people that are kind of paralyzed?
Mhm. Um, it's simply taking action. You know, we are all terrible at what we do initially. When I did my first podcast, I was shaking in my boots, right? Like when we
Right.
had our first TV appearance, I was terrified. When I did our first building, when I was all on my own aside from my dad, I had the city officials telling me I wasn't good enough and that I needed to hire someone else to replace me, right? Every time we do something new, we are terrible. As kids growing up, there's a point you couldn't walk, you couldn't talk, and now that's second nature. I think the most important thing is to realize that we're all terrible initially. We fear that, okay, our first step into this is we're gonna put something out there and it's not gonna be very good. And you don't wanna have that, like, "Oh, I don't want people to think I stink at this," right? It's more comfortable to say I never even tried.
Right.
But that's normal. That's like part of the process. There's one study that was done that I found really interesting where there's like a pottery class. And one of the class, they said, you can take as much time as you want. We want you to do one pot that's really good. And then the other class that they said, don't care about the quality, just do as many pots as you can. What they found is that the really good pots, yes, they were better than the other group that did the first pot of the other group. But the group doing a bunch of pots, their later pots were better than anything that first group had produced. And so the big thing is to take the first step. I was talking to a prominent YouTuber the other day, and I asked, what does it take to get to your kind of level? And he said quite simply, the reason most people don't make it to where I am at is because they never hit record, right? You just never start with that first recording. And so I think the big thing is your mindset. Just recognize you're going to be terrible. That's okay. That's where we all go through, and just start.
This is why I love the topic of anthropology. It's kind of where I get a lot of my perspectives
Mm,
from. And, oftentimes I think where this stems from is that we have this primitive mind that wants to protect us, but then we have a higher conscious mind of thinking big, dreaming big, making tools, right? Making goals. And I think where it stems from is we're social creatures and we don't
yeah.
want to do something against the group. We don't want people to think badly of us. That's why we don't want to take that first step. We don't want to hit record because we don't want people laughing or, saying, "Oh, that's cringe." But I think that's part of the growth is that's the scars that you develop in order to become that person you want to be. You have to go through these steps, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
this is what this is what difficult feels like. People say, "I want this goal." Well, how badly do you want it? Right? So it's almost like that, right? So it's a social aspect of I want to fit in with the group, but then it's once you start realizing, okay, this is my, you know, subconscious primitive mind trying to protect me because at the end of the day, I guarantee you, not ton of people saw my first podcast episode and I was so scared to hit, publish. I'm not even kidding. I think I spent at least like a couple hours just sitting there, like I don't know if I should go with this. I'd already recorded it, edited it. It's that hit, and then because I think in my brain it was like, okay, this is about to be broadcasted, and so many people are gonna make fun of me, so many people are gonna see it, but that wasn't the case. You know, it wasn't like a ton of people saw it. So, and and especially compared to now. So it's like that first step, that first recording, that first action is honestly the scariest, I think.
It's so true. It's so true.
Even in your line of work, I'm sure you've seen that exact same principle play out.
Yeah, I think that's partly why this industry gets stuck the way it does, right? I think we're kind of, you mentioned this, but we're so hardwired to want to feel accepted by other people. And there's a good, probably biological reason for that, because when we're out in the wilderness and the beasts will chase us down, like we need to stay in a group. So you're more likely to
Right.
survive if you stay in
Yeah.
everyone's good graces. But that really hinders us in today's society because we then have that fear of stepping out. And I love your example there of sitting there for a couple of hours, like
Yeah.
worried to hit publish. That is everybody's story. And the
Yeah.
difference for you versus the other people is that you hit publish. And so in our industry, we see the same sort of thing where people don't branch off and try new things and bring more in house because it's scary. It's something new. It's painful. It's challenging. And it does hurt, right? I've got
Mm,
lots of scars. I got lots of stories to show with that. But I'm better today for it.
mhm. It's it's almost having to ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice? Is it today or is it tomorrow? Because at
Mm.
some point you have to sacrifice something.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was reading recently a really simple quote. You get to choose one or the other. It's either hard today or hard tomorrow. And it
Right.
applies for so many things in life, right? Like
So
health, for
true.
example. You either eat well and exercise today, or tomorrow you'll be in tough shape, right? Same thing with finances or your goals and your dreams. You don't get to get away from hard. You
Yeah.
just get to choose which hard you have. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, even though it takes a little bit of initiative and energy, it's better to have it hard now.
Yeah. Because I think that's the biggest motivator for me is I don't want to look back with regret,
Yes.
right? It's a huge motivator.
Yeah, life, my as I was saying earlier, my dad died relatively young. And I often think about how short life really is,
Hmm.
right? We only have about 5,000 weeks to live here on earth. And I'm not exaggerating. This really does drive me. I often look and say, okay, I've got this much time left. I don't want to waste the minutes I have here on earth. Right? And that actually drives me to make decisions differently than I think people normally do. I will
Yeah.
take risks. I will push things forward. I will just not be okay with the status quo because I know I only got so many weeks left to live and I want to make the biggest positive impact that I can. I don't want to waste this amazing life that I have.
Right. I think about, something similar all the time, and I notice that you have a family, right? You're a father.
Yeah.
So how does that balance work between you know what I mean? Because we have a limited time here. You want to spend time with family and friends, but you also want to grow your goals and your big dreams. Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, this is a challenge. For me, the number one thing is to eliminate as much out of my life as I possibly can that's not related to what's most important to me. So that's step one. Even down to like my drive time. And then even when I do drive, it's how do I kind of listen to podcasts during that time? When I am making my dinner, I am eating while I'm making. So I've got this
Right.
routine down.
Right.
When I'm relaxing at the end of the day, I am watching documentaries or things that I can learn. Or as I'm drifting off to sleep, I'm watching YouTube videos. It's amazing how much you can learn on YouTube, even as you're falling asleep. So even things like my exercise, I know when I'm exercising, and it's a 15-mile run every Sunday. I've got my workouts I do during the week.
You do a
Uh,
15-mile run?
yeah, every Sunday.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so, but as long as you get into a habit or routine, it's not so bad. And actually, it's my favorite time of the week. So I think there's a lot of like building the right habits in your life, and then not wasting the literally not wasting the minutes. And then for my family, the big thing I've learned there is, uh, so I'm very present with my family when I'm at home. especially my daughters. And
Mm-hmm.
so the what I do is I may be sitting with them on the couch, and we're all like goofy off on our own thing. When that's happening, then I have my laptop and I'm working. But as soon
Right.
as they come over, like, hey, Dad, I want to go dance to a song, or I mean, we were literally dancing to Gummy Bear song last night.
It's a
um,
good song.
yeah, it's a crazy song. But as soon as they ask for that sort of thing, it's okay, yeah, let's do it. Or another kind of fun way that I've been able to merge worlds is my daughter. Over the last few months, she's only 5. My older daughter's 5, and she's been asking, "Dad, I want to make a YouTube channel. Dad, I want to make a show. Dad,
Mm-hmm.
let's do something like A for Adelaide. Like let's do this."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, this is just a phase. This is gonna blow over. And then she got really persistent with it. So then a few weeks ago, we recorded our first video together. And actually, it was a ton of fun. And then, like, we did it again the week after and the week after. And then it started to grow, right? Like, this is crazy. And it's been a kind of just a fun, like, bonding kind of exercise for us. And then, like, the side benefit I'm starting to realize is the attention that's gaining. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
helping on the business side.
Right.
So that wasn't the intent, but I'm really
Right.
thankful to her to like merge the two worlds together in kind of a fun, creative way.
That reminds me of this quote that says, "Good friends consume together, but best friends create together."
Ooh,
Right? So
that's really good.
it almost takes your relationship to the next level when you're
Yeah.
creating something with someone, whether it's making homemade pasta from scratch or making a YouTube video, right? That concept of creating together in a way is it's just another level of a relationship.
It really is. It's surprised me. I didn't see that coming, but I see this really blossoming for no other reason than just a really cool activity for my daughters and myself to do together.
Yeah, it's got almost a multifold effect of your business. It's helping her, gain skills. It's spending time together. It's almost like an idea that makes sense in hindsight, but you wouldn't have thought about it unless you tried it, right?
That one hit me in the face too, I guess.
Right.
But I think that's where I'm finding the right balance is as much as I can to be engaged in activities that move multiple things forward. And if I can do that, I can multiply my time in a way that you normally can't.
Right. Almost the concept of that quote, if you create even with the people that you're closest to, I think it just gives you profound effects in all aspects of your life.
That's such a great quote. I'm going to take that away. I'm going to
Go
use
for
that in
it.
another podcast.
No problem. Mike, I really appreciate you being here. And this show is called Learn or Be Learned. So I often ask my guests this last question, which is, what is one key lesson that either you learned from others or you want others to learn from your own experience that you want to leave with the audience?
The biggest is hiring the best people. But since we talked a lot about that, I'll give a recent lesson that I'm learning. It actually comes from a book called Multipliers. And in this book, it gives this concept of different kinds of managers. You have some managers that can multiply the efforts of others, right? The managers that you're excited to work for, that you're willing to give 110%, that you're learning and you're growing and you're becoming a better person as a result of working with them. But on the other side, you have this world of diminishers, right? It's the managers that demean you, that make you feel small, that you don't push forward and become a better person. But I think the interesting insight from the book is that there's this middle ground. It's called accidental diminishers. So many of us work to try to become multipliers for others, and that's great. The effort is noble. But so many of us at times are accidentally diminishing toward others. And so, better understanding what those diminishing tendencies are and how to alleviate them to become more of a multiplier will explode your business. Because if you can get more of everyone that works around you, that's so powerful. So, that's a fun lesson that I'm learning today.
It's the idea of almost like your subconscious or you're not fully aware of what you're doing to others is this accidental diminisher. In what ways are you bringing that back to light?
I think it's understanding my tendencies of being accidental diminisher. I think one of the things I can do sometimes is I can get very passionate about a particular area and I'll
Mhm.
dive into it, right? Like I'll go work with the framers for a few weeks because I want to speed up their process. And I think that I'm helping because I'm right there beside them, lifting walls, shoveling scraps, what have you. But sometimes that can backfire, right? Because the CEO's down here. I'm not doing a good job. I'm screwing up. Like that's, and then you start to realize that the deeper game is not your intent. It's how your actions are perceived by others, right? We judge ourselves based upon our intent. Other people judge us based upon how they feel about our actions and how they feel about us. And so the deeper game is understanding how they're feeling about those actions and then changing your actions to be better aligned to support them and how they feel.
I love that. I've heard that similar idea of we often judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intent, but it should be the
Yeah.
other way around, right? We should
Hmm.
judge ourselves by what we're actually doing, these actions, and other people by their intentions, and it'll make your life a lot easier, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you being on this show. We had an awesome conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course.